So what I was just saying, Holly, was that it's like this past week, I've just seen this in our business in LA. Doug and Chris and I, we've seen this uptick in writing offers and a listing appointment next week. And then I've seen it with other agents that I'm talking with and working with and helping. And there's a lot of stuff going on. And that's even before the rates may happen in midsummer and the other big thing happened in midsummer that you're going to talk about
Sure.
today. But but thank you for coming. And everybody, this is Holly Mayberry, and she has been around a long time at EXP, head of broker operations. And I just thought, I saw that she was saying, she was happy to talk to groups. And we do this called monthly of something of value. And I thought, this is the biggest value we can bring in right now, because I know there's just so many people with so many different things going on in their minds about all this. And I think it's a real simple thing. I think it's a real good thing, actually. And I know, Holly, you do too, because I've heard you on several different things. So please start and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and take it from there.
You bet. Well, first of all, hey, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm actually up in Minnesota today, visiting with some
Oh.
agents here. I'm originally born and raised Arizona, and got into real estate right out of college. So I didn't know any better, and it just seemed like a really good idea. But I absolutely love. I started with EXP in 2018. I came in as the designated broker for Arizona, and just I've served in different iterations across the nation for things from Arizona Realtors President, served on forms work groups, you name it. I still serve at the national level on their risk management committee and so forth. So kind of a real estate nerd. So I've been watching the lawsuits, the antitrust lawsuits, really closely, mainly because it's great popcorn time, but also because of how it impacts you and your day-to-day business. So in 2019, we had three different lawsuits that were filed, two in Illinois, one in Missouri, around the violation of antitrust. And the allegation was that there was this collusion between the National Association, RE/MAX, Keller Williams, Home Services of America, and Anywhere. Well, the first to go to trial hit in Missouri in October. And unfortunately, the jury came back on October 31st and said, yep, there was absolutely an antitrust violation. And so they awarded damages that were pretty substantial. Well, prior to the jury coming back, basically Anywhere and RE/MAX settled or did a proposed settlement. Keller Williams settled or did a proposed settlement in February. And then in March, the National Association of Realtors put forward a settlement for consideration by the courts. Now, this is where it gets kind of crazy. Not only did EXP get named in the subsequent filing of the lawsuit in Missouri and all of the others, we're in about 13 different ones across the nation right now. But the National Association of Realtors settlement, it really got a little bit crazy because what ended up happening is they put forward of how the changes to the industry are going to impact. And their proposal is many of these changes will come about in mid-July. Well, why mid-July? Why pick that? Well, one, it takes a little bit to get things kind of ramped up because one of the most significant changes that we're going to see is the offer of compensation to a buyer broker will no longer be advertised in the multiple listing. Right now, we're used to seeing it. NAR did change the rule in October, taking
Hold
sorry
on
about
one
that,
second.
taking it
I'll
away.
mute that.
Yeah. Taking away the offer of compensation from being at least $1, they took it down to zero. So we have seen in some markets a zero offering of compensation. But what this means to you and I in our day-to-day business coming in July is that we will actually have to, prior to opening a door, have some sort of an agreement of one, how we're going to represent that client, whether it's single agency, if you're in California, dual agency, for those of you in Texas, maybe transactional, or if you're on the East Coast, designated agency, what does that look like? And then we've got to establish how much we're going to work for. And that should be done, prior to opening the door. So it gets a little crazy because many of us in practice have not really flexed that use of a buyer broker representation agreement and that buyer broker employment agreement. Well, what's interesting is Washington State earlier this year, they actually passed a state law that you have to have buyer compensation negotiated prior to the signing of an offer. And so they require it. You can't get paid in the state of Washington unless you have that. And that's by law. Oregon just passed the same thing. That goes into effect in January of 2025. So that's the first big change. Nothing in MLS. Now, some of you are like, okay, so we won't have the field in MLS. I'll just put it in showing remarks. And the answer is no. Anything in MLS cannot have an offer of compensation. Now, why is the DOJ and everybody going after this? Well, the biggest reason is they felt like sellers should not predetermine what a buyer's agent gets paid. The buyer should. It's the buyer's fee for service. And also, there should be no broker to broker compensation. That's the biggest thing the DOJ is going after as well. And so that elimination in the MLS is huge. So that goes away. Okay, great. We're all going to have to do buyer brokers. Okay, great. No problem. Many states already have those. EXP, we as a company recognized there were certain markets or states that did not have a buyer broker. So we launched one last October. And I'll tell you very candidly, we're updating it right now. There was an FTC white paper that came out in February that, man, they were very succinct in saying buyer broker agreements are too hard to read. They're not consumer friendly. And we really think they should be one page and speak to the consumer. So we took that to heart. And on Friday, EXP launched a single property buyer broker agreement. It is one page. And this agreement I'm really excited about because it's designed that if you get an internet lead or you get somebody you haven't met before, you're going to show them one house. It allows you to have that offer of compensation negotiated, but then it's an off ramp for you to be able to have a deeper conversation with them to go to the next level. And that's really what it's designed around. How do we help the consumer understand what they're getting by hiring you as their agent? And so the form is live. And I apologize, I got you on my cell phone because I couldn't get the internet to work on my computer where I'm at. So Chuck, I'm going to drop the FAQ and the link to the document in our workplace chat so you can distribute to everybody on the call and get out to everybody. But if you're in workplace, it's there. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't waiting for July for something to happen, but that you all had it right now. It is being field tested across the nation right now with great reviews. So definitely take a look at it, use it, see how it works. If you look in workplace and you look at EXP Realty announcements, it went out on Friday. And so it's there for you. So that's the first thing. Then we realized that, okay, that's just the first step in a relationship with a buyer. Maybe it's somebody you've worked with before. You've got this long-term relationship. The current buyer broker agreements most states have are like reading Apple terms of service. They're very arduous. They're hard to understand. Like no consumer wants to sign them. So how do we make it consumer friendly? So our brokerage ops team right now is in the process of drafting a simplified, more robust buyer broker agreement that you can use with buyers that you are looking to get into a longer term relationship with. So more than one house. That you are looking to maybe have open agency with, like you'll only get paid for the houses you show them, but they can work with other realtors, but also explaining transaction brokerage and what that looks like. So these are really designed to allow you to have a better conversation depending on the state you're in. We know there are state forms. If you are comfortable with your state form, use that one. You don't have to use what the company provides. We just are looking to be proactive in the space, knowing that some of the realtor forms don't read well for a consumer. So how can we be proactive and get ahead of this on behalf of the consumer and take care of them? That's our goal. So I'm going to pause there because there's a lot going on. And I know many of you probably came to this call with some specific questions. So Chuck, if you're okay, I'd love to just jump into Q&A and I'll do my best to answer anything you have.
Yeah, absolutely, because I'm sure there are questions. Let me make the gallery bigger here, or if people want to raise their hand down in the let me go back to gallery. I'm sure we have questions. But one I have basically, and this probably will be of others, and I think you answered it. So if someone calls me to see my listing, eventually when we're putting this into place, I would get them to sign that, and it could be a form that's specific just to that property, or it could be one that's for more properties.
Correct. It could be specific to that property or it could be for more. Now, let me throw another wrinkle in there. If it's your listing, you represent the seller. You don't automatically have to offer agency and employment to a buyer. That's current today. You can open the door for them and they can walk through and all of that, and you don't have to be their agent. You can choose to, and the minute you do and you expect to be compensated by them, you will need that buyer broker. So it's a conversation that I would definitely have in advance of opening the door. But if you get in there and it's like, hey, I'm only going to represent the seller here, you're on your own, and you get into conversation and you go, wow, I really like these folks. I'm really getting on with them well. Like we could really do some cool things. And they go, yeah, Chuck, we want you to be our agent. Then you would do kind of that next level buyer broker, and maybe you establish a 2 or 3 week, maybe a 30-day time frame where you work together, you look at properties, or maybe it's only for a certain zip code or a certain property type. You can limit yourself or expand your working relationship depending on what you want to do.
Okay, good. I see Suzanne, you've got your hand up. What's your question?
Hi, Holly. Suzanne Ash. I'm in Northern California in Sonoma County up here. Um, I am wondering if the judge has ruled or the DOJ has actually ruled on the NAR settlement agreement yet.
They haven't, and we don't anticipate that they are going to anytime soon. I think that, and let's break those two apart. So Suzanne is asking a very nuanced question. With regard to the judge, I don't think we'll see anything from him until probably sometime in the fall, and even potentially later. The rule changes that we're seeing proposed by NAR to take place in July are really kind of that good faith effort, so they don't have to pay more. And so it's kind of that industry shift that we're already seeing MLSs be prepared. Like my understanding in talking to the attorneys from CMLS, California MLS, is they're already working to remove the buyer broker compensation. They're looking to expand the fields for concessions from a seller to a buyer, which could include their buyer broker commission. And actually, what's so interesting on that is on Monday, we actually saw the GSEs or the loan service companies come out and say that, like for FHA, whatever the buyer broker compensation is, if that's a credit from the seller, that will not be counted against the buyer's total concessions. Because we know like FHA is limited. Great. The compensation will not be pulled into that bucket, which is great. We're still waiting on VA. That's to come, but we expect VA is likely going to follow along those lines. Now, DOJ, slightly different, Suzanne. I think DOJ is probably going to file an amicus brief or a friend of the court that is basically going to weigh in on what they want to see. There was one thing that NAR didn't put in their settlement that I think could be interesting because it's a bugaboo for the DOJ is any offer of compensation broker to broker. The way NAR worded their settlement basically said that if I have my own private website and I upload my listing directly there, I'm not going through an MLS IDX feed, that I could do an offer of compensation broker to broker. And I think the DOJ will probably come back and weigh in on that as a negative. But you know, if I'm a betting woman, that's where I'm going, but we'll see what happens.
Do we think that they're going to rule before the judge or later?
You know, I think the judge is going to wait to see what I think we'll see something from the DOJ pretty quickly. I think they're getting mostly what they want because the next thing that is on the DOJ's kind of hit list, so to speak, is what I'm understanding is around basically private listings or office exclusive listings. So if any of you are aware of like Howard Hanna in the East or Midwest, where they've got this exclusive inventory that they don't put out to anybody, that's something of concern for the DOJ.
How can we, is there a place we can go to sort of keep up to date on the DOJ or the judge or anything like that?
You
Like
know,
time?
it's brutal right now, I'll be honest, because everything is coming out by drips and splashy headlines. And so some of the court filings you can follow, but that's also like reading bad stereo instructions. And the DOJ is not there. So the DOJ is leaking things to the media. So
That
right
gets
now I'm
translated
on,
correctly. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah. So
I,
not any one source.
no, I appreciate you adding the piece about that. This is our good faith effort because I couldn't figure out if they haven't ruled yet, why are we doing anything? Why are we changing a
Sure.
thing? I understand good faith effort if that's going to make everybody, calm down a little.
In
That's
theory,
a good
yeah.
point.
In theory, yeah.
Yeah, in theory. And I think the other thing is knowing that the industry doesn't pivot on a dime, especially because it can take 9 months to 12 months to write a new contract or a new document for a realtor organization. And then, get it out and train on it and so forth. We're lucky that we were able to do it in weeks here. And we just have that different luxury as a real estate company. So more to come.
And we're not considering writing our own contracts, are we? We're going to stick with
Not purchase contracts. Purchase contracts are kind of a no-fly zone as far as I'm concerned right now because they're so nuanced state to state and on local levels. The buyer broker compensation agreements are reasonable enough, but I also defer, like, if you've got one that you're using, oh my gosh, please lean into your state. That makes sense to me.
Forgive me, I have one more question, and that is, I seem to be getting confused on all my I have been on, I don't know, at least 6 of these kinds of calls about this. Are we allowed to negotiate our buyer agent before we write an offer or no, I'm sorry. Are we allowed to include it with our offer on a property, our buyer's agent agreement?
Yes. So this is what I would say, and this is such a great question, Suzanne. So if I'm writing an offer this afternoon and my buyer is cash poor, they're FHA, first time home buyers, what I'm probably going to do in the purchase contract is I'm going to write seller to credit buyer X, whatever the commission is that the buyer and I have agreed upon, uh, seller to credit buyer X at close of escrow to satisfy buyer's contractual obligation with buyer broker. And so that verbiage, and oh, by the way, that verbiage has been used over the past 15 years. I used it in short sales. So this is not new. It's taught in the seller representation specialist class from NAR. Like, this is good, solid verbiage. And so we can write that into the contract. The nuance that a lot of people go, well, we can't write commissions into the contract. Well, we were told not to. It's not illegal. The reason we were told not to is it gets negotiated. Well, guess what the judge and the DOJ wanted? Everything to be negotiated. So this is what I would say is you can ask for, let's say you put a request from the seller to credit the buyer 4% of the total sales price. And the commission that you have that you and your buyer agreed to, let's say it's 2.5. Well, the balance of that is to go to their loan costs or whatever. And the seller comes back and says, hey, I will only pay you 3 or credit you 3. Okay. At that point, you and the buyer can have a conversation as far as if you want to go down, or the buyer can say, hey, I really need this for my loan costs. I will pay you directly at close of escrow. It's better for me to do it this way because of whatever my accountant said. So the buyer can always come to the table with funds if the seller doesn't credit all of the amount that you asked for.
Prior to close of escrow or after close of escrow?
Prior to close of escrow.
So they can
Don't do the work and not get paid.
Escrow. That's the dilemma. Yeah.
Yeah.
You.
Always at close of escrow, always on the settlement statement. Great questions. All right, iPhone 14. You've been super patient.
It's okay. Hey, Holly, it's Debbie Renna Hines, and I'm
Hey.
just I'm taking an extended vacation right now, just a mini one. So I don't think anybody would want to see what I look like at the moment. You pretty much answered one of the questions that I was going to ask. I've been doing buyer's agency agreements for 21 years that I've been in business. I've never not used one except for one, and I lost the buyer that way, and they went to the listing agent. And you answered the question about, if there's a disparaging amount by what the seller is willing to compensate and what I'm going to compensate. My question, and I wanted you to explain that because I've gotten so many phone calls about it. I just want to make sure that I was explaining it correctly. The other question I wanted to ask is with FHA, is that going to be, or has there been any talk about other government loans like USDA, VA, or even Sonny Mae?
Yes, all of them have been discussed. VA is the only one we haven't heard back from. I believe USDA is in the same boat as FHA. Again, the article that came out from the GSEs, and it was a rule change. Please don't make me quote the rule because I can't remember. It was like rule 13.24-1 or something ridiculous, but if you need it, I've got it. That basically it will not count any offer of compensation from a seller to credit to the buyer so they can pay their agent is not counted against the concessions that would needed in the normal course of a transaction. So again, we're anticipating VA is going to follow suit along those lines, but we just don't have it in writing yet.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you for showing up
pleasure.
today too, for doing this, because I know that you've done many of these and it probably gets to be a little tiring, but you know what? Better our agents know about it than not.
I'm so happy to talk to you all. When I look at what's coming, I'm excited that we get to take care of our consumers at the highest level, because the ability for you all to ask these questions in a safe setting and understand and be able to sit with a consumer across the table and go, all right, let's talk about what this looks like for you and your family. That's empowerment, and that makes everybody better in the marketplace. So the more we can do it, the better we all are.
Great. Thank you so much.
You bet.
I think that's a great statement. We get to take care of our clients at the highest level. And I think that, I may be wrong, but I feel like so many agents are acting out of fear, and what they're talking about and discussing and everything. And, that's going to push them in a certain area, or maybe even push them out of the business. They may get so frustrated they want to get out of the business. And all this really comes down to it is learning a change. And we've had changes in the 25 years I've done this. I've seen several changes, and and we forget it was a change, and we go on. And the newer people coming in, this is great because you don't know how we did it in the past. But I feel like the more information we have and being positive about it, the better we're going to be.
100%. I think the challenge I would say to you all is wrap yourselves up, and this is a professional's market, and you are the professional that your client needs. And so my favorite market that I worked in was actually the short sale market. It was incredibly hard, but what I loved about that market is I got to sit across the table from people and strategize how we helped move their family forward in whatever predicament they might have been in. But we got to do it together. We got to really focus on next steps together. And that was impactful to me. And so when I look at you all, this is the embrace that we get to have. This is a professionals market where we get to shine because we get to have honest conversations about how we take care of you. And that's what our clients deserve.
And I also think it's a matter of knowing your scripts, So what do you say when we're out at a dinner party or something this weekend and somebody says, oh, I saw in the news, it's horrible about 6% and all this stuff, are you worried? Or how are you going to get paid? Are you going to make it? What's your answer when someone says something like that?
My answer is, one, there's never been a fixed fee, but when it comes to working with my clients individually, we establish my fee for service so I can take care of you again at the highest level. And knowing what it's going to take in this market to strategize for your family to be taken care of. So it doesn't matter if I'm helping you sell, helping you buy. My goal is you. And then what I'll also say is, look, in this market, you've got to have a trusted professional. And anybody that I'm talking to, I'll say, until you choose your agent, make sure anything you say can be used against you in a negotiation. So choose your agent early and wisely.
Very good. And everybody remember this call is recorded, so you can go back and write that down, because that's
Yeah.
a great script. That's a very great script. And what do you say to that person that's or that agent that's worried about buyers going to the listing agent directly and avoiding them? Is there something, a comment you have
Well,
on that?
and I think, yeah, I think some buyers will, because they don't know what we do for them. And so that opportunity, right now in the marketplace, this is the perfect time to start whatever you use in your daily to talk about what you do, whether you're on social media, if you're doing videos, blog posts, mailings, you name it. What I would be doing is breaking down the transaction from a buyer perspective and how you show up for them. What does it mean to look at a house? What does it mean to have a trusted professional by your side? What does it mean to negotiate for repairs? What does it mean to hire the best home inspector? All of those things, I would compartmentalize it in such a way that you start to accentuate your value. And I would be doing that probably a couple times a week, talking about it from the buyer perspective in quick, short bites, because over time, the next 3 months, you will have this library of awesome built up, that when people find you, they're referred to you, they Google you, right? Like everybody, most buyers, they only interview one agent. Well, why is that? It's like, oh, this person looks good, but most buyers are referred. So somebody they know, love, and trust is referring you in. What I found is most buyers, when they referred in, they still Googled me. And when they Googled me, I had all of this stuff online and socials and whatever. And they were like, oh, I feel like I know you because I know what you're going to say next. So those are things I would consider if you were to make any tweaks in your business plan going into the month of May. I would do that. What are you doing a couple times a week to break down the transaction from a buyer perspective?
Yeah, and that's so easy to do. It's just a matter of doing it, and putting it down on your list, on your schedule, on your calendar to do that. You just said it a couple times a week, and I think when we're working with someone, send them to our YouTube channel or to our Facebook business page, whatever works easiest for you. Some things are better than others, but whatever works well for you, build that content there where they see that. But you said it exactly. They do business with us because they know, like, and trust us. And I think the trust is so big in this situation. And, I don't know if it was you or Leo, I heard the other day on a video say that we do so much effort to go on a listing presentation and sign that listing to lock that in. And yet, we don't want another realtor to come along and steal that listing from us. It's going to be the same way with the buyer. We're locking them into a contract with us, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, the way I look at it is you're locking them into a mutual agreement to work together, right? So it takes more trust, and buyers buy on emotion. They walk in and they go, this is it. This is the house, because it feels good. It's all the feels, right? Sellers are selling on business. Show me my bottom line. If you can phrase things in a business aspect to help that buyer make a good decision, you win the day, because buyers getting started are still in a business mindset. What is this going to cost? How are we going to afford it? What does it look like? And if you are hitting them with facts up front, they are so prepared to jump off that cliff with you. And then when they start to get emotional because the house feels good and they're going to be able to, raise their babies there or bring the new puppy in, all of those things, now the feels come out, and now you start to take it to the next level on that journey with them. So it's an emotional connection.
Right. So I have a question. So are we more protected now when we have that agreement with someone, and then, somehow let's just say an agent doesn't stay in contact with an agent as much as they should, and the buyer goes off on vacation for a while, comes back, and then they go look at something else with somebody else. Where's that overlap going to be, that they've already got a buyer broker agreement with an agent over here, and then they're starting?
I would say that it's tricky, right? You got to set people up for success. So what we are doing to figure out, like, enforcement of a listing is easy in some instances because your sign's in the yard, your lockbox is on the front door, right? It's like people are coming to you. But in some instances, it's not easy. Because sellers can be like, hey, my listing expires on Friday and we'll just go around the agent and so on and so forth. I met you at a party, come look at the house on Saturday. So we see that happen. The key is going to be consistency and our follow-up with buyers and what they can expect, how we work with them. So if I have not been staying in contact with my buyer and that buyer goes on vacation and says, I really like Holly, but the minute they say but, and I haven't been in constant communication, I've got estrangement and potentially abandonment, and my buyer broker could be subjective. So be careful. You want to be very thoughtful in how you're following up. I mean, you think of sellers right now. How many of you call a seller after each showing? How many of you call sellers with an update every Friday or every Tuesday? This is the showings. This is what's come on the market. This is what's gone under contract. Maybe you're doing a once a month CMA, if it's even lasting that long, on price adjustments. All those things that we've done routinely in the past. Well, what are you doing for your buyers? What are you implementing or thinking about? Are you calling every Friday? Are you talking to them on Tuesdays about new listings that hit on Monday or what you're anticipating, that are coming up in the market, interest rates drops? How are you staying engaged with them? Because that's going to make a difference.
So having said that, we don't own them as soon as that form is signed. We still need to stay engaged, and there is potential they could go with someone else or we lose them. And I think that's what we all need to realize, that we need to stay engaged. And if we do, then it shouldn't be a problem, but it's when we ghost them that it kind of goes a different direction, right?
100%. We've got to lay out the expectation and then follow through with it, right? Show me, don't tell me. Like, don't tell me we're together and then not show up for me.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk real quickly on open houses, Chuck, because I want to make sure that your team hears this. With regard to open houses, if you're there on behalf of the seller, it's your listing, or maybe you're on a team and it's the team leader's listing, whatever, you're there on behalf of the seller. So buyers coming in, you don't have to sign the buyer broker agreement. But if that buyer goes, hey, I'd really like representation, great. That's the minute you turn and you decide, am I going to offer them representation? And if so, what is my compensation? Now, if you're a brand new agent and you're hustling and holding open houses for other agents in the company, what I would recommend is, and we put a sign that you can print out in the marketing center that's all EXP branded and looks great. And it basically says, welcome, EXP represents this seller. If you would like representation, please let us know. And it's very, very simple to engage in conversation of, well, what does representation mean? Why are you representing the seller? Now in Maryland, that's required by law as a disclosure, but we wanted to just take it that next level instead of being required by law, but how do we engage the consumer in such a way that they can make a better decision?
Okay. Interesting. How many states do you keep up with?
All of them.
I knew that was the answer. I wanted everybody else to hear that. I mean,
yes,
we got to keep up with our own state. You're keeping up with 50. So
yeah,
that's amazing. I'm trying to learn another one right now for a test, and I'm just like, this is so different from what I've been doing, and I just got to kind of, and you're doing 50. So you give me strength. What
you got this, Chuck. You got this.
What else? Does anybody have any questions? I'm surprised we don't have more questions because this has been a hot topic. Anybody?
This is Bill. A question about new construction.
Yes.
Yes.
If you have a buyer's agreement with the buyer and you go into new construction and they're willing to give them more additional compensation, are you allowed to take that portion above and beyond your 3%, whatever you have put in there? Or are you not?
Unfortunately, no. And this is what I would say strategically. Think about your new construction. And I know, like, especially in Florida, there's bonuses all over the place. Bonuses get tricky because you usually have to disclose a bonus in writing that you're receiving it. And a lot of times the bonus goes away. Suddenly the buyer needs new drapes. So, or curtains or window coverings. If you are doing both residential resale and new construction, I would put that on the buyer broker agreement. And maybe you know that the new construction in your area is offering 4, 4.5, 5. Cool. Write that in there. And if they're offering less, you can always come down. But residential resale, maybe you're putting 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. Great. Put whatever number in there that you choose. And so if they go new construction, it's this much. If they go, residential resale, it's this much. So you absolutely can break that out. I wouldn't be afraid to do that. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi, thanks for being on. So with a buyer broker agreement, can you write in a negotiation, like to be advised, like negotiable?
No, it has to be, and that's part of the settlement agreement. It has to be specific and upfront. So think of it like getting into an Uber and not knowing how much it's going to cost you to get to the airport. And the Uber driver's like, oh, we hit traffic. Oh, there was a pothole. Oh, that driver hit me. Your price just went up. We can't do that. It's got to be exactly what you set out.
Can you put not more than 2.5%?
That's too ambiguous. From what we're reading with the legal counsel, it's too ambiguous. So we want to be really specific and say it's exactly this or less.
But then see, this is where I get confused, because isn't the new rule, well, always been the rule that we're negotiable. So why can't we write negotiable?
Well, that's the thing, because if you go up, it gets crazy and the client is subjective. So again, I go back to my Uber reference. You need to know upfront exactly what you're paying for and what the cost will be. And that's part of the litigation.
If we say not more than 2.5%.
I would be cautious in that. I don't have exact verbiage from an attorney that says, that's bad, this is good. I anticipate we'll see that come down. But right now, today, the way we're wording all of our forms is exactly a dollar amount or a percentage of sales price.
Okay.
So you're saying that it would say my fee is 2.5% or 3% or $3,500 or $10,000. It's a definite flat percentage or an amount.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just was going to comment on that. So, but then it can always be less than that, but not more.
Correct.
So just protect yourself. And if it's not more than 2.5%, then just put in 2.5% and it's going to be that or less. You don't need the words not more than.
Yeah. Thank you. Exactly that. Go ahead, iPhone 14.
Hey, Holly, it's Debbie again. I hope my phone doesn't die, but so I know there's a couple people on this call that we've had the same coach over the years, and I always included on my buyer's representative agreement a cancellation clause. And I think just as you were saying, you know, how do you represent your seller? Do you call them after every show? Do you showing, do you give them feedback and so on and so forth? I think with a buyer's representative agreement, you also have to work for that client in the same manner. And some people are going to be reluctant to sign one of those. And so with using a cancellation guarantee, we've always said to them, listen, you have no reason not to sign this, because if you don't like us after a few days of working with us, you know, maybe I don't like you either. We can just cancel this contract. But I think it shows that you will really work harder for the client. It's just my opinion. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I know some people are very hesitant and still very hesitant now to ask for buyer's agency agreements to be signed. But heck, you guys, this is how we get paid.
Yeah, Debbie, you bring up such a good point. I think that it is tricky, and I'm pro, like, honestly, if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I don't know that I'm going to like them. What if they're crazy?
Yeah.
Right. And I mean that with a lot of love and affection, but what if there's somebody that is so outrageously demanding that, you know, they want to be on 10 acres, but with all city services and walking distance to Starbucks? Like, stop it. You know, we want to have really good choices here. And so as a result, I want to be able to cancel, as do they. But that's why we launched with the single property buyer broker. We wanted to give that toe in the water so you had the ability to meet with a client for the first time, have a conversation, and see if you wanted to work together on another house to show. And if you do, great. If you don't, train ends there and you can move
Very
on.
perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you, Holly.
but I love I love the cancellation. And the other thing I would say, y'all, is don't sign yourself up for a 6-month or even a 45-day buyer broker agreement. It's something that can be renewed, just like a listing agreement. So as a result, you know, maybe you go to work with somebody for 2 weeks, see if they're really in it to win it. And if they are, great. And if they're not, or you don't enjoy them, you can move away from each other. There's nothing wrong with that.
But isn't
ahead, Wendy.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Wendy.
Do you want to go first, Chuck? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, to add on to what Debbie said, isn't every buyer going to have to sign an agreement with a buyer's agent,
Yes.
whether it's me or someone else? They have to sign one. So they're not going to be reluctant to sign one at some point, right? It's got to be with somebody.
Yeah, they're going to sign with somebody. And this is an industry-wide change. So we may see some buyers go directly to sellers agents who don't want to represent buyers. And I think that that's what's going to be really unique as we go through the fall together, of how do we really talk about the transaction through the buyer's lens and take care of them. And that's why my challenge to you is, look at your business over the next 60, 90 days. How are you explaining the purchase process through the buyer's lens? Because if you can break that down simply, you suddenly became more valuable, because by the time July, first part of August hits, and some other folks are trying to recognize, well, how do I capture buyers and get them to sign this? You've already got that library built and that muscle built. You can articulate your value higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wendy, what were you going to say?
Well, I think that kind of helped sort of my question, because I'm fine with a brand new buyer coming on now, because it's pretty straightforward how to get them to do it. Everyone has to sign. But so that kind of helped me, because I was about to ask, okay, how do I deal with a buyer that I've been dealing with for 12 months? And, you know, to just suddenly say, okay, now you have to sign something. But I think that's kind of help that I suppose.
I would start talking to them now, Wendy, and just say, hey, you know, I don't know if you've seen the headlines, these are some things coming forward. And so right now, this is where we sit. This is how I get paid. But these changes are coming. And, you know, I appreciate our working relationship. I love working for you and your family, and would like to continue it and get you across the finish line to finding your perfect property. But in order to do that, we're going to have to come to an agreement, and we can always ask the seller to credit you to pay my fee, or pay me directly, pay my company. But in order to do that, I have to have something in writing. And so for us to continue to work together, I'd like to start talking to you about it now. And what questions do you have?
I like that. That's so that we can give it to the seller, because we're actually considering writing an offer on something, you know, currently that it's already in the MLS and everything. So it's weird for me to, you know, talk about.
Yeah, so this is what's cool. If it's already in the MLS and you write the offer and it goes, great. But if the offer doesn't go, it's an opportunity to say, hey, by the way, if you know, these are some things happening, that this offer of compensation, this is what it is in the MLS. But going forward, it may not be there. Or on some houses, it may not be there. So as a result, how can we work together? Because this is my fee. This is how I feed my family, pay my bills, and that sort of thing. And this is what I work for.
Right. Yeah, they're also listing with me as well. So I'm just finding it a little, you know, it's
sure. But it becomes one of those it becomes one of those opportunities that having that conversation now, because when they list with you, you're going to be mid-July. And so as a result, they're going to have to take into account, do we want to credit a buyer so they can pay their agent, right? They're helping the buyer finance their purchase.
Yeah, actually, that's helping me to work out too. That, yeah, okay, great, thanks. By the way,
good questions,
hilarious. You're hilarious. I love how you were talking about the crazies. We have quite a few of those in LA.
Look, you know
Well,
what? I live in Sedona and I'm close to the Magic Rocks. So yeah, come on down.
Okay, thank you.
Renee, you have a question?
I think you're on mute still, Renee.
Sorry. Thank you. First of all, I appreciate you being here. Secondly, do you see this being a bigger issue for first-time home buyers who don't have a lot of cash, who are just listening to the news and going straight to the listing agent, and then they don't have representation? Do you see that that's going to be an
I am
issue?
concerned about it. Personally, I'm very concerned about it because I love my first time home buyers when I was selling all the time. And so I think that right now, the best advocacy you and I can be is be talking about this openly on our social media and whatever, of like, why a buyer agent makes a difference, why a buyer
Right.
agent in your corner makes a difference. And I think that if you can do that and start to package yourself in that way, is going to be huge. I'm kind of fascinated, like if I take my popcorn out and my, my training hat off, it's like, I wonder what's going to happen with dual agency. I kind of think it's going to go the way of the dodo, but I don't know. Like we'll see where we're at in 6 months or a year. But I think that people are being preconditioned to want their advocate, that they want somebody on their side that's solely on their side. So how do we do that as an industry and do it well?
Thank you. Appreciate it. I just see that so many first-time home buyers are naive and they don't know what they're doing. And I just see a lot of lawsuits coming for them not being represented and saying, well, I didn't know, even though, oh, well, I went to the listing agents, and even though I had no brokerage representation, I just see issues.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think that if I put my broker hat back on,
Yeah.
with my broker hat on, our paperwork's going to have to be so tight. Our timing and delivery of the paperwork and how we communicate is going to have to be so seamless. And I know we can do it. But the key is like, how do I assist you in your day to day so it feels comfortable? And that's why I love the opportunity that Chuck has given us to visit to get together today.
Thank you.
You bet.
See, great question too, Renee. Beth, how are you?
Hey, thanks for the call. Hi, everyone. So I had two questions, and maybe you answered this, but I wasn't sure. So are we allowed to call, if we have a buyer, are we allowed to call the listing agents and ask them if their seller is open to reimbursing the, buyer broker agreement? Like, can we ask them up front?
Absolutely. Why
Yeah.
not?
Why not?
Yeah,
Right?
and actually, that's one of the forms that we're developing right now. I don't know that we're going to see it on every listing that you're going to be willing to call, but I think in some instances, I've got some agents who are like, yeah, I'm going to call and find out. I've got other agents who are like, I'm going to ask for what I want. We want the washer and dryer. We want the dog, like all the things. I'm
Yeah.
writing it in the offer. I'm a good negotiator. It's a strategy. And I don't think there's any harm in calling the listing agent and saying, is your seller offering compensation? Or is your seller, what amount of concessions is your seller willing to give?
Okay. And then on the contract, can we just say,
What's
like, the seller, asking the seller to pay 3% toward the buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and escrows? Would that cover the buyer broker agreement?
I'm going to say no.
Specifically say for the buyer broker agreement.
Right now, I think this is going to be fleshed out based on what I saw from the GSEs earlier this week. I'm going to say no. I think we need to be specific in what that credit is going towards, because they said it's 2 different buckets. And so we want to be specific. Like if you want the home warranty paid, if you want prepaids paid or buy down of interest rate, or, a year's worth of pool maintenance, be specific as to what it's going to. Now, if you go in,
if we did, like, say you talk to a listing agent and you get one where the seller's like, well, I'm not paying, the buyer's broker fee. They don't want to do it, but your buyer really wants the house. And then if we put it in for 3% of the closing cost toward the sales price toward closing costs. If that 3% then just
Well,
goes
what if we just say seller to credit buyer 3% at close of
Yeah.
escrow?
at close of
period.
escrow, right? Because it all washes out the same. You see one number on the settlement statement, 3% as a credit. Who knows
It
if that,
should.
covering the buyer broker, or is it covering the rest of the fees? I
You
don't
know,
see.
it should,
Yeah.
Beth, but I'll be honest, I think it's going to flesh out. I don't know our timing to flesh that out. And so because it hasn't happened yet, we're going to learn together, but we're going to learn as an industry, which is good. So
So you say,
today,
for now, put it on there, be specific.
yeah, for now, that would be my recommendation. Be intentional
Yeah.
with what you're asking for.
Okay. Yeah.
I just had a thought.
Then-
Do you have something else, Beth?
Yeah, one other question. So say you've got a buyer that you find somewhere and they want to go see a house, and you talk to them about signing the buyer broker agreement. What if they say that they already signed one with someone else? I know you talked a little bit about, it's on the buyer's agent to stay in touch with that client. You can't have them sign it and claim them for life, like they can never
Sure.
around you. You have to keep earning your business. But
Sure.
what kind of conversation without, crossing the line? Like, can you say, well, have you talked to him lately? Or, what is
No.
lately? Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And technically, we should all be asking that right now, because an exclusive buyer broker employment agreement or exclusive agency means it's kind of like walking up to somebody's listing, knocking on the door and saying, hey, I know you're listed with Chuck, but are you happy?
Yeah.
You want to list
right.
with me? Like, you
You're
can't do that. And so the minute somebody says, yeah, I've signed a buyer broker agreement with somebody, it's like, oh my gosh, that's great. Please, I want you to get the best possible service. And the best service you can get is by going back to that person. I would never want to violate somebody's contract. And the other script that I would flip on them is this: I would never want to subject you to having to pay 2 commissions.
Yeah. Right.
Because if they sign with you and they've also got an exclusive
Yeah.
buyer broker with somebody else, in theory, and I'm using air quotes there, in theory, they
Yeah,
could
right.
sue
Yeah.
for that fee.
What if a buyer says, well, I signed something a while ago, but I don't really want to work with him anymore. I want to work with you. Then
That's great. You need to make sure that you fully ended that relationship. It's kind of like getting married to somebody who's already
Yeah.
married.
So what is
Breakup.
required? Is there like going to be a cancellation, a buyer broker agreement, or an email will suffice, or what?
It depends on
Yeah.
the state and it depends on the broker. So it is so specific. And this is the other thing I would say: never tell somebody how to break up.
Yeah.
The minute you tell somebody how to break up, you could be interfering with an agency relationship, and that could put you in some jeopardy. So if a buyer is unhappy, encourage them to turn around, speak with their agent directly, and if their agent is available, to go to the designated broker. But you really can't comment beyond that. If they would like assistance in the future, you'd be very open to interviewing for the position.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask, in California, we can do dual agency and sometimes that's frowned upon. Especially, I've always frowned upon it if it's in the beginning of a listing and you've got multiple offers and, but if it's been on the market for several weeks or something, it's a little easier to finagle. But I would think maybe in this situation, this, representing someone who doesn't have an agreement with someone else, and now you're representing them as the seller, as the listing agent, and you're going to do a buyer broker agreement with them, it'll be a little bit more weighted or recognized. Am I wrong for thinking that?
Potentially. If it's my listing and somebody says, I don't have an agent, would you represent me? Well, what in dual agency, you just gave up seller rights. Like the confidentiality piece and the negotiating strategy, right? Now you can't give of yourself fully to that seller because you know things about the buyer that they should know, but you can't tell anymore. And that becomes problematic. And I think that right now, in a lot of our dual agency states, I know in Arizona, I used to do dual agency all over the place because it's just what we did in our market. It was very common.
Yeah.
And most sellers, they were like, I don't care if you get both sides. Well, now it's like, wait a minute, why can't you tell me what the buyer's motivation is? Why can't you tell me what they're using for the money that they're asking for? Why can't you wrote the contract? So I do think we'll see some shifts there. But again, guys, that's like popcorn inside real estate baseball kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
I think when it comes to what we see in the next 90 days, 6 months, it's all right, how are you communicating with the buyer or seller? How are you preparing them for subtle changes that are going to happen in the multiple listing that will change in the way we communicate and negotiate offers? And so having those conversations right now, if you're getting ready to take a listing here in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I would encourage you to be having a conversation with the seller around, okay, if we're still on the market in July, we may see some changes in the MLS. This is what it means to you. We may see buyers start to ask for, and we're already seeing it in some price ranges, for concessions for closing costs, for other things. We may see it for buyer broker, and this is what it means to you. And so I think having those open conversations are going to be lovely. And the more proactive you are, the better you position yourself is that in that trusted advisor to get somebody through everything that's going on.
Being more proactive, I think that's extremely important. Let me ask you this, and wrapping up here, where can we all watch for any updates from you, things we need to know specifically? I know workplace, but is there a certain group or just in the news announcements? Where can we watch for things?
Yeah, so EXP announcements, we're going to be dropping everything there. That's going to be everything from new ads to the market center for you to use with your buyers, new forms that we're rolling out, training updates that we're going to be having. And then I also anticipate that Leo and I will be doing a few more videos together as the market continues to adjust. So hopefully those are helpful for you. And then I'm super active on workplace chat. If you think of something, you have a question, you're using a form, please reach out. I do a lot of training with your state brokers. So I see you guys are all over the country. Definitely reach out to your state brokers because we're working diligently to keep them as up to date as I am on everything. So, and how to train and best practices and scripts and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
Elena, there are already scripts in the Market Center with the FAQs that we've rolled out that you can utilize, and we'll continue to get more for you as we field test. We're going to be doing masterminds with agents who are really strong in buyer broker, so you can use that as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for doing this, because I know you do it all day long and you're saying the same thing and you're like, can't they just get it? But
no,
you know
man,
what?
I'm here for you guys. Like whatever you need, so here for you.
We gotta keep hearing it, and eventually it soaks in, but the more information we can get, I think we're all going to be the better for it. So thank you so much. And maybe we'll do this again in a few months when we have some more information and more questions. All right.
Absolutely.
All right.
Chuck,
Okay.
thank you all.
Thanks, Holly.
For
Thanks,
now.
everybody.
Thanks.
This will be recorded
Thanks.
too, and we will email it up to you, by the way. Have a great day.